All right, so here's a video I thought I might share. I need to add a feature to one of my macros. So a very handy feature macro I have is to get rid of duplicates. So when you're dealing with a lot of parts, let's say like right here on this page, we have down here in the corner, I have 2,300 objects so far. So like here, for example, I have these what we call affectionately called dog bones. Um, I have duplicates here. So I have 6 objects and I have 3. So there's one on top of each other. Um, just as it sits, there's no problem, fine. But if I export this to the CNC router, the router will route these twice, and it will go on the outside of one on the inside of the other. So it causes a really big mess, and potentially is very expensive. And it's not easy to find duplicates unless you write a program specifically for it. So our routing department, the software they use, has no way of finding duplicates. So I wrote some code. I call it affectionately Doop Checker, and you just push the button, it pops up. It's a little widget. It'll find multiple objects based on position only, so it ignores the size, whereas I use the position and the size. So it interrogates each shape against all other shapes in the selection based on its size up here and also its position of center. So if it finds a match, which obviously these two objects would have the exact same size, the exact same center, it will go ahead and then quarantine those into I have it doing a whole separate layer right now, which can kind of be a pain in the butt. It's easier that way when you have a lot of pieces. It goes ahead and just quarantines them to a different layer so I can deal with them piece by piece. Because sometimes you might have a false positive where you don't want, you might say, well, why not just delete them? Why not just have them, find them, delete them, and then you move on with your life? But if you have a false positive and, it's an important piece, you don't want that false positive to be deleted just willy-nilly. So I go ahead and have them go onto a whole separate layer, and then from there I deal with each piece. But sometimes it can be quite a bit. On the other hand, on something like this, I know that there's only 3 here. So I have 6, I have 3. I just want to deal with this quickly. I don't want to have to go through the hoops of adding a whole nother layer and then dealing with it, and then I have this button here that will erase the duplicate layer should I go down that road. So what I want to do is just make a little checkbox right here that will stay true. Boolean code. It'll be It'll be true that anytime I do this, I'm just going to have it take the duplicate and just shift it. And I'm going to go ahead and have it also take all duplicates and then group them into one piece. So that way, let's say a lot of these here are duplicates, and then like if this moves a little bit, it'll be hard to dig this piece out if it's amongst a bunch of other pieces, and it becomes a nightmare. Because what if you accidentally just select all of these and then hit duplicate, and now you have duplicates of all of these. So it could become quite messy. So I'm going to go ahead and have this to where it'll take all the duplicates, group them, and then I can drag them without having to go to a whole separate layer. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the integrated development environment, the IDE that comes with this for Microsoft VBA. So shifting over to my second screen, my right-hand screen, this is the layout I use for this side. I use the Dockers, various Dockers that are native to Corel. So I keep my properties Docker. I use the object manager, which is super valuable because I name all my shapes. So that way I can find things very, very easily that way and work with layers, turn off shapes, things like that. Here I have, like, this is called my go time. So this right here launches different programs that I've made if I want to find different things or, different, like I have a contour machine here that does easily inlines and outlines super easy. So I don't have to do a lot of ungrouping and, uncombining and stuff like that, break apart. This right here is a exporter home. This one here names files, exports files for me, saves CDFs or CDRs, exports to DXF and EPS, different file formats. But it basically, once I type in, whatever file name it's going to be, it just stays that way. And that way it just automatically names files for me at the push of a button. So it makes things easier. The Launchpad is one of the first things I ever cooked up many years ago. This allows me to make circles on the fly, make stud holes on the fly. These right here launch all the different widgets I use. There's Doop Checker right there. If I were to push that, what we're going to work on, that launches Duplicate Checker. Like here, these are all different stencil fonts. So these are words that I have to type over and over. So all I have to do is push a button and it puts it on screen for me. So anyway, a lot of this stuff we'll go over later. So what I do over here is I have my macro, or the Dockers, I have my macro scripts right here. So this allows you to get into your code. So you go over here, double click that, or right click it, sorry, yeah, right click it, you'll show the IDE. So that pops up, so this is where you actually write your code. All right, so now that I'm in the IDE, I'm going to go ahead and open up all my forms. So each of these is a form that like I use for like my rectangle machine there. This right here allows me to do my different scribe lines and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the Doop Checker, duper, and there we go. So right now, as you know, the Doop Checker takes all the shapes that are duplicates and puts them on a different layer. What I want to do is put basically a gate right in between that. So what I do is I grab the little toolbox here and I select checkbox and I go ahead and put a checkbox there. So it just defaults to, there's no other checkboxes on this form, so it's checkbox 1. So I'm going to give it a do caption here, and it's basically what it's going to do. So I want to do group shapes. All right. So as long as that checkbox is checked, which is a true value, either true or false, not the hardware store. So as long as this guy here is true, down here, change that to true, then this will always be checked when this thing starts up. And so what that does is that creates a gate where instead of going and making layers, it's going to go ahead and group shapes the way I want to. So now what we need to do is code that in, because right now this is just sitting here, but the Doop Checker program has no idea that it's there, and it could care less. So what I'm going to do is open up my code by double clicking that, and here is the code. Now there's a whole basically a religion to writing code. There's the literal part where if you don't write it properly, if you don't write it correctly, then the computer can't read it and it just doesn't work. But there's another, so once you get that and you write it correctly and the computer is doing what you want it to do, great. There's a whole other religion to making sure it's written properly, as in readability. Does it look good? Are the indents, if you're familiar with Silicon Valley, there's a whole joke of whether you use spaces or tabs. Such as this green here. These are notations. The computer doesn't read this. This is for someone else to read. And that's a huge thing, is notating your code. So because this code is only for me, I don't notate it. If you were writing this for a big company that has other people coming to check out your code, and later on, 5-6 years later, somebody else is going to come see the code and you're not there to explain it, they're going to have a very hard time figuring it out, and they'll have to spend a lot of time. Since I'm first and foremost a person who makes signs for a living, I don't really have that much time to be a developer, nor am I a developer. So I just play one on TV. So my code is for myself. The funny thing is, though, I've written some of this stuff 5-6 years ago. Even I find myself, when I go back to check my code, it gets a little bit confusing. So I end up doing it to myself, where I am doing some reverse engineering going, what was I thinking? So anyway, so now that we're here, I'm reading here that it goes down, it just starts at the top, and from here down, it runs this code. What it's going to do, though, first is it's going to go over here. So I have a whole nother section of code that actually finds each piece. So I'm going to right click that, I'm going to go definition. So now this is the bread and butter right here. This is the code that it goes through and finds each piece, compares it, puts it in a little pile of Legos, and then it sorts it all out, and then that's what it is. So it's like a freight train. The freight train is going along, following the tracks, and once it gets to the end, it's done. So it's following the tracks here, and it's going to get to the bottom, and it's going to get to the end, and it's going to be done. So what I need to do is I'm going to add a junction. So I want the junction to stop the train when it gets to a certain point and make it go to a different track. That's what I'm adding here. So as I read this, the thing goes through, checks everything, and then I think where we want to do is when it adds it to layer. So that's what I'm seeing here. This is where it is right here. So you have a shape range and it's moving it to layer. So a shape range is a range of shapes that's virtual. So in the computer here, you can either take a circle and make another circle of it, and you have two circles, and you have a copy of that circle. Or in the program world over here, where you have shapes on the screen, you create a shape range. And that is just a virtual version of all those. And you work with it virtually, and then at the end, the computer then pays the tab and basically does what you told it to do. So all during this code, nothing is going to happen to those shapes until the end, and then the computer will then go, okay, we told all those shapes to go there. So this right here combines all the shapes, and then this right here is where we're going to add our gate. All right, so this is a good example of some relatively horribly written code, because this is very confusing even for me, but I kind of understand what's going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this, what they call white space, and this is where I'm going to insert my switch in the track here. So we have an if statement, else, and an end if, and you can see where this is all crammed together. So this is where the religion comes in. So tabs, I use tabs. Sorry, Silicon Valley, but I use tabs. All right, so this is where I'm going to insert my gate. So a really handy one is called case. So basically, it's select the case. So we're going to do select case true. So then what it does is it goes and interrogates each of these, and if something is true, then it will do that. And then we are going to do end select. So that tells it we're done with this part. So it's going to come through, and as long as the shape range count is not zero, then we're going to go ahead, it's going to go ahead and execute this code. So case me, which is this form speaking. Oh, no, wait, hold on. I forgot. This is not quite that easy. So we're going to do that, checkbox 1, and equals false. And it's just that easy. Ha ha ha. So what I did is I set up some conditionals on the railroad track. I basically installed a switch. So now it's going to come down the tracks, and as long as there's more than 0 shapes in the shape range, which basically equals duplicates. If there are duplicates, then it's going to come through here and it's going to say which one of these is true. Dupe box, the checkbox 1 is true, then it's going to execute this code. If the false, then basically it's just going to continue on the way I had it written. So what I'm doing is I'm adding the new code here. So I know that my shape range duplicate, this is something I named, so I called my variable shape range duplicate. So I'm just going to go ahead and use that. So we are still dealing with the same shapes. So the program up here created this group, and see right here, shape range duplicate add. So it took all the shapes that are duplicate and created this little collection. So now that I have this little collection, I'm going to work with this collection. So that's what I'm doing. So now I'm going to go, let's see, I'm going to make this into one shape. So I'm going to go up here and add an object. So I'm going to call this group shape as shape. So when you group something in Corel, when you do Control G through Corel, it turns that group into a shape. So dot group. There you go. So that is essentially doing a Control G. But when you do Control G, it takes a whole group of shapes and literally makes it into a single shape. That's how Corel sees it. So I had to create this shape up here and say, hey, this is a new shape. I had to name it. So now Microsoft Visual Basic is telling Corel that this new group of shapes is called that. So now that I have this shape, I can now do to it whatever I can do to shapes in Corel. So now I'm working with this shape. So I have group shape dot, and it automatically, this is what an IDE does for you. This is what a developer environment does, a good one anyway. Lets you cheat. It basically gives you everything that you can possibly do to a shape. There is nothing else. There isn't any hidden aspects to this where I can do things. Obviously there's plenty, but I could delete the shape, I could do whatever. What I want to do is I want to move the shape. Well, now that it's grouped, I want to go ahead and move it a certain amount. That way I can easily see, oh yeah, that's the group of stuff, and I can deal with it. Then I can ungroup it later and do whatever I want with it. But this makes it easy to differentiate. So I'm going to go ahead and do move. It's alphabetical, obviously. So I could actually just do it this way, top M, and there's move. Now if you hit another space, it automatically tells you what it's looking for. So delta X is the difference in X. So left to right, how much do I want it to move? Well, I'm going to make it a percentage of the actual group, because if I'm working on a big project, a big piece, and I say I want to move it just a ½ inch, that might not be enough. So what I want to do is I'm going to make it move a percentage of the whole thing. So group shape, I'm going to go ahead and go group shape dot size. Let's just do size height, because most of the time things will probably be rectangular. So let's do width actually. We'll do size width. Now that would move it the entire size width, and I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to do a percentage of. So we're going to move it a percentage of the size width. That way we're always within a certain amount, it can move, it can change, it's a certain amount that is kind of a known amount. So, and then it's usually a good idea to not just put a negative, because I want it to move to the left. So I'm going to go ahead and times it by -1. That gives me a negative value. But if you put a negative in front of it, sometimes a negative and a negative. So you always want to make sure that you're multiplying by a negative. It's just better coding that way. And then the same thing here, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy paste it so I don't have to mess with it. And I want it to go down. So this will move it the y-axis, top and bottom. So it's going to make it move down, and it's going to make it move to the left. And it's going to shift it by 25% of whatever the group is. So if the group is just a small little group that's only an inch wide, it's going to move it just 25% of that, 1/4 of an inch. That'll be enough. But if I'm dealing with a big group of shapes, then it'll be easier to see if this thing moves quite a bit, but not a whole lot. And then I can deal with it. And now that it's grouped, it'll be safe to maneuver. I can click it, and I won't lose little pieces everywhere. So that being said, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and name it, because that way it makes it easier in layers to find this thing. So now that I have it, I can go group shape.name, and since it's a string, you go ahead and give it quotes, and that means that once it sees quotes, this is literally a string of letters, and it reads it as that. So anything else that's not in quotations like up here is an object. So set is an instructions that this thing's reading. It sees case and it says, okay. But when it comes to seeing quotation marks, like up here, up top here where I have duplicates, right? This is literally a word, and then it goes ahead and translate that as a word. So I'm going to go ahead and call this Doop group. And there you go. It's fun. You know, when you're writing your own code, you can come up with cool stuff. You get to have fun with your own code. So, all right. So that should be enough to actually be, you know, that's it. This is all it takes, is to add this little switch in the tracks to give a choice of which direction to go. And once it comes to here, then it'll come back through, and you should be, you know, should be good to go. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a test run on this, and I think what I'm going to want is this group shape object to be selected and the only thing selected. So I'm going to run it to see if, when I'm done, the only thing selected is the group shape. That way I can work with it directly. If it's not selected, it's kind of a pain in the butt, because sometimes you'll have to go find it and then select it. So I'm just going to do a little test run. Now what you do is go up here to the top. First thing you do is debug right here. What it does is it goes through the entire thing to make sure that it all makes sense. And it's always fun. Did I do it right? Essentially, this is, you're pushing this button saying, did I do this right? And I did. So it compiled, everything's fine. Doesn't necessarily mean it still might not have a bug, but at least the compiler is happy. I wrote this correctly. All of this adds up. So we save it, and then we're going to run it. All right, so back to my other screen here. Whenever you open the IDE, just by the nature of how it works, it shuts down all of your macros. So every time you go in there to change something, you got to fire everything up. So this brings online all of my macros here. So I'll put them back where I like them. Once they're in place, then that's where they are. They stay there. So let's see how this Doop Checker works. So we have our duplicates here. I want to try to find these and move them. And so I'm going to fire up Doop Checker, and he pops up over here on the other screen. And we're going to go ahead and select this group, and group shapes is selected. And here we go. Look at there. This is what I was talking about. It is keeping the selection of the originals and the new. So what I would like it to do is drop these and only have these selected. So we'll just pop into the code and change that up real quick, and it should be good to go. All right, so I'm back into my IDE over here, and so we got to deal with that selection issue. So what we do is, while we're still in this area, so the train came down the tracks, went down here, we only want to live in here. We don't want to mess with anything else with selection out here. So we're staying within this case. So we've named it, and then the next thing we're going to do is active document, which means you're dealing with the entire document, all the pages, everything. So active document, which is basically the highest level. Well, the highest level is application, CorelDRAW, the actual application. Next one down is you open a document. So you're working in the document. And within the document, you have all the shapes and everything. So active document, dot, and we're going to clear selection. So now this means nothing's selected, period, on any page. So then what we're going to do is, let's see, I think we go active document dot create selection. Oh, add to selection. That's maybe what it is. There it is. Add to selection. And then it wants any shapes or variants, anything like that. So we're just going to go ahead and add group shape. Simple as that. So it comes through, and as we know, it has both the original and the duplicate selected. We go ahead and clear that selection, and we go ahead and re-add to the selection group shape. Should be as simple as that. Debug, make sure we did it right. Looks like it liked it. It's grayed out. We'll go ahead and save it. and we're going to jump back to the other screen. So we're back to this screen, and we have our objects again, duplicates, 6 objects. So I'm going to run my code one more time here, and there we go. That's what we want. So shapes are grouped. The selection is only them, so now I can come to this and just grab them and do what I want. I can make sure that they're there. And then what we do is go over here to the object manager, which is on another screen, but I'll bring it over. So you can see now that my little group is now called Doop group. And I could find this easy enough if I want to look for it with one of my other widgets that will find things that are named. So I can select all this, and I can go ahead and just select the name. I'll pick it right here. I hit pick. It grabs the name. I can go like this, and I can easily find it in this whole group of stuff. So I can select stuff, give me my Doop group, there it is, and then I can deal with it as I see fit. I can give it to Caesar, thumbs up, thumbs down, what to do with it. So anyway, that looks like it's a successful little deal. Now what we do is test to make sure that it still works the other way, the original way. So I'm going to add some duplicates. There we go. So now I have 6 there. And just for ha-has, I'm going to grab some other stuff. And then I'm going to turn this off. And now it should do it like it did originally. It should put it over here in its own layer. There we go. And the fact that it kind of blinked, I know what it did. Object Manager, if you go to the top of the layers, there it is. So it added this layer, it named it, calls it duplicates, and there are our 3 dog bones. This is the way I used to deal with it. But as you can see, when you're dealing with a lot of stuff, this can be kind of a pain in the butt. This is more for when I'm getting ready to export and I have all of this on a separate page, and we can go over that later. But anyway, so all I need to do here is delete this, and it will get rid of all this, or I have it coded. I can go over here. Do I want to erase the duplicates layer? Hit yes, and it gets rid of it. And the duplicates are gone. But again, I think an easier way now that I've cooked this up, I think this will be a much easier way to do this, is to, I can select all these. Let's make a bunch of duplicates. I'm going to make sure that that group shaped is on, and I'm going to go through here, and it's going to find all the duplicates, and then it's going to move them a certain percentage. And they're already pre-selected, so I can kind of bring them over here where it's safe, and I can deal with them. And it looks like that'll be good. So now back to making signs, because I have a lot of duplicates in here and it'll be easy to deal with now. So that's made my life a lot easier. So yeah, let's find some more. Just for ha-has. There we go. Look, oh, there's more duplicates. Yay.